So I wanted to start this video off with an excerpt from one of my past favorite books, The Way of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. And the excerpt is something which is very small, but it's stuck with me for a very long time, which is when you know the way broadly, you'll see it in all things. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is this is going to be a bit more of a discussion type video, a bit more of a sort of philosophical brainstorming type video rather than a real systematic step-by-step guide on how to get over something, which is what a lot of my content is. It's going to be evaluating the role that martial arts has to play in self-development, in your self-development journey. It's not a vital role. That role can be replaced by so many other things, but it is a role which I think is somewhat unique to add so much depth to your personality, so much to your essence as a person. However, why is it that most people I see practicing martial arts aren't taking so many of the really, really cool, insightful lessons that maybe our predecessors have taken in the martial arts journey? And they've taken these lessons even when things were much, much more life and death. Whereas for us, it's more about winning a certain kind of medal made out of a certain kind of metal. And depending on what kind of metal that is, that gives us our sense of self-worth. This is actually taken, or martial arts, in some ways, when they were more deadly, when they were used in a much more deadly fashion, in a much more life and death scenario, somehow, at least in the works that have been preserved for us, they still seem to have a much more spiritual, a much more fundamentally self-actualization about them than perhaps is happening today. So my name's Aaron, I run this channel. And for those of you who don't know, I say this a lot in my videos, but in case it's kind of gone over your head, I'm not just someone who is making a video on martial arts who doesn't have extensive knowledge of them. The main martial art which I have extensive knowledge in is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I used to compete at that at a regional level, a national level, an international level, and I've got medals on all three of those levels. Not at black belt, only at purple belt, up to purple belt. So for a big part of my life was dictated by martial arts. I would wake up and I would train about 6 to 8 hours a day on like the median average. And then on my days off, I would only train about 2 or 3 hours a day. Okay, so those are my days off. I didn't really have any days off because I didn't believe in them back then. And also when you're much younger, I mean, I'm still pretty young now, but when you're much younger, you can kind of get away with that kind of training regime. So like I said, I'm not coming at this from just a kind of hobbyist perspective. I used to really want to do this actually as my profession before I stumbled into my mentor, Pierre de Souza, and my other mentor, Sister Kante Kema, the Sasana Dipika of Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, the Dharma Sukha Foundation in America, which I have a ton of videos on as well, if that's something that's interesting to you. But even for me, so I'm not just using this as a video to kind of like point blame on others and say they're not really progressing in the way they should. I'm actually taking this as a personal story, as a personal journey, because I realized from my own journey, I was doing a martial art, the gentle art, so it's known, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has so many cool concepts, so many cool philosophies, so many cool understandings. But yet, in every area apart from my martial arts life, in every other area of my life, things are very stagnant. And it's because even though I had remembered this phrase, I had drilled it into my head, I found that there was something that was really, really resonant about it, something that was really, really meaningful, I still wasn't fully embodying it. The phrase of, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in all things. And if you're on your martial arts journey, or if you're on a musical journey, or if you're on some kind of what should I say, just some kind of an art journey, this will be very, very resonant for you because all of the lessons you are learning there, you can apply to all different areas of your life. So I'll take an example. I'm going to sound like one of the Gracie brothers right now, but they talk about this concept called leverage, right? In Brazilian or in Portuguese, it's called alavanca. So you can bastardize this in many different ways. However, one of the ways that you can look at this, if you want to look at it more intuitively, which is in order to do something that looks easy, in order to do the gentle art, you have to do your homework first to make sure that you're setting up the position so that you, even if you are the smaller man, you are the smaller person, you can actually do something very, very effortless, or it looks very, very effortless to other people because you've done your homework, right? Because you put yourself in a position where you have full leverage and you put your opponent at a position where they have very little leverage. So if we just take this in jiu-jitsu terms, what does this mean? It means you've got to set up properly, you've got to know, you've got to have a 10-step plan, you've got to know what this position is, how to maneuver them just inch by inch, inch by inch. But there's a whole other section that we can add when you know the way broadly, you see it in all things. which is how can we apply this to life, right? Am I setting my life up in a way which actualizes and utilizes leverage in the correct way? And the answer to this for most people is no. They are trying to go about life without any leverage. Or if they, let alone without having any leverage, they also have negative leverage. They're in a bad position. But they're trying to achieve this goal over here or this thing over here. When really they are down here and they just need to move here. And once they've done that, they just move up here. Then they can move up here, right? This is a spatial metaphor, so don't take it too literally. But what it means is, even just from this one simple concept in jiu-jitsu, there's this whole plethora of meanings that we can take. Okay. Now, for you listening to this right now, maybe you have a different martial art, maybe it's Muay Thai, or maybe it's Kung Fu, or maybe it's whatever, or you have a different art entirely. How many of these concepts do you have ingrained in your system, ingrained in your psyche? How many of these do you have that are just effortless? You just understand effortlessly. But when it comes to everything apart from your art, you're not utilizing this concept. This is why holistic thinking, I mean holistic thinking in the way that we look at the whole picture always. This is why this is absolutely crucial. It's probably the number one trait to develop the most if you want to be able to live and enjoy your life, but also get all of the benefits to the maximum of all different areas of your life so that you can work on one area really specifically. Let's say it's an art, let's say you're a musician. You can work on that without having to sacrifice as much, right? Because you still have to sacrifice, but without having to sacrifice as much the rest of your life. So what do I mean by that? So while most people, when they get tunnel vision, they have to sacrifice a lot. And obviously you have to sacrifice time, you have to sacrifice energy. There's a ton of stuff you have to sacrifice. But you can utilize and develop and really nourish this one area of life and have it almost like trickle down economics, but except that it actually works. It trickles down and it seeps into all other areas of your life via osmosis. But the only way this happens is to develop this holistic thinking, this systems thinking, this ecosystems thinking, the way of thinking which doesn't section off different areas of your personality, different areas of your psyche, different areas of whatever, however you want to call it, but actually allows yourself to see yourself in the grand picture of things, i.e., oh, I had this concept of leverage. But am I really applying that in my job? Is that why every time I ask for a raise, my boss says no? Or is that why I'm maybe not respected by my team members? Because I'm trying to go for this big ask when I haven't actually put myself in the position to make that more likely to happen. And then because I'm not doing that, I go into this downward spiral where I keep on hearing no and I keep on getting rejected. That then builds this sense of self that I just keep on saying, no, I'm not rejected. I must not be good enough. And then that continues the cycle on and on. But if I use this concept, because if I was doing this in jiu-jitsu or martial arts, and I kept on trying to flow a flying armbar when I've got no grips and the person's shooting a double leg on me, does that mean that my armbar isn't good? Does that mean that I'm a bad at the art? No, it means that I didn't set it up properly. It means that I'm trying a Hail Mary. So many of the times we go around in life trying to Hail Mary everything. And the reason we think that is because we haven't actually sat down and analyzed within ourselves all of the lessons that we've had learned and evaluated our current decision making against that, against all of the lessons we've learned. Is this really the right thing for me to be doing? Should I really be in my life trying to throw up a flying armbar when I've got no grips and this person has 20 kg on me and is already shooting and already has grips on me, is already shooting in on me? Is that a good idea? No. No, it's not. So why, when I'm in this area of my life, whether it's work or if it's in dating and relationships, whether it's in just socializing, trying to make friends, whether it's trying to be authentic on camera, whatever it is, why is it when I'm trying to do that, I'm doing the equivalent of that in jiu-jitsu. I'm doing the equivalent of trying to throw up this Hail Mary of an armbar. But then the same way in jiu-jitsu or in martial arts, I would laugh it off and say, yeah, I tried something cheeky that time. It didn't really quite work out. Here, I'm taking it so personally. Most people have so many resources available to them, but they don't take the time to check in with themselves. and to have that lateral thinking. This sounds really interesting to you. This is one of the main things that I work on in one-on-one clients. And I have my one-on-one link below, which is just a consultation call, about 15 to 30 minutes, where we just have a chat about where you are, what you honestly want to do, what's kind of not working in your life, and if we have a good chemistry together. There's no hard sales or selling. But if this sounds really interesting to you, this is one of the many things that I work on. It all comes down to your mindset around practicing, because no one can tell me that Miyamoto Musashi is different because he was doing it martial arts in a more leisurely way, so he was able to open his mind more. Because this is what a lot of competitors would say, or a lot of people who want to take something really seriously, want to get really good at something. This was a man who had, I think, around 50 no armor sword fights and was undefeated in all of them. Even if not all of them were to the death, it can be not to the death in name. But when it comes down to it, when there's a sword swinging and you zigged instead of zagged, then that is death. And still he was able to utilize this because of this character trait, it seems like, because of this way of thinking, holistic thinking, big picture thinking. Now, I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'll give you some kind of bit more of a systematic way of being like, okay, yeah, Aaron, I agree. I can see what point you're making. I do have a ton of resources. I do have these things that I am good at, and I understand, at least in conception, that I can link these things together laterally. And just like that, without me actually having to do anything else, without me actually having to get any extra experience, I just have way more access to my, whether you want to call it authentic power or a more mature perspective, just almost instantly. Because it's almost like unlocking the dams, right? You're letting the water flow. And now instead of all these different rivers, you now have an ocean. I understand all of that, but how do I actually develop this? One of the interesting things that I'll give you right now, which is probably one of the most unsexy homeworks I've given on this channel, but I'm going to give it anyway because it's effective, is start researching ecosystems, how ecosystems work. But I mean it in the biological sense. So you can look at ecosystems in terms of politics and all that kind of stuff, but I want you to go to the place where it's found, where you look at ecosystems of jungles, ecosystems of the world, of the ocean. Because what this does is it builds the mental framework of you looking at life as an ecosystem, you looking at your mind and your internal world as an ecosystem, because it is an ecosystem. This is not something which is woo-woo, okay? This is something which I'm encouraging you to go out and test and see the benefits that come with it. There's also drawbacks that come with it. One of the drawbacks is that if you get really comfortable with that way of thinking, your mind becomes overly systematized and you start looking at the map rather than you looking at the territory. So an example would that be is, oh yeah, like 99 times out of 100, this is how my mind works. So I'm just going to look at that map. When in reality, if you actually check in with yourself, because all of this stuff is subjective, remember, it's not objective, it's subjective, you realize that there's something different. So the territory is actually checking in with yourself, whereas the map is all of the past experiences that you've had, and based on that, where you're putting certain things. So the first homework is looking at ecosystems. These are people who come up with the ecosystems and the ecosystems themselves, because this allows you to make an ecosystem in your mind with all of these cool traits. You have all of these traits that you have, but the reason why they're not all firing, the reason why you're not getting the most out of them, the reason why most likely you clicked on this video and you're watching up until now is because the links between them are either very few or they're not there at all. So it's about building those links together. So you might be really resourceful. There's someone probably out there who's really resourceful in competition, is a real hard worker, real scrapper, isn't afraid to get their nose bloody, their nose dirty, and really get after things, and they can really rise to the challenge, and they actually really enjoy the feeling of anxiety and they can work with it. And that's amazing in competition when it's something physical, but when it's something mental, or maybe there's a hard emotional conversation they have to have with a friend or a family member, maybe it's to do a career. When it comes to this, somehow anxiety gets the better of them. That scrappy personality, that underdog, that kind of bulldog, really healthy, competitive personality is not there. And it's because, well, most likely it's because of some shadows. We're making a different sense out of one thing compared to the other, which I have a ton of content on this channel. Please go ahead and watch. It's probably something to do with that, probably some mindfulness stuff. Because of coming from the shadow work, because you made it something different, your mindfulness isn't quite there, whereas for some reason, physicality is a really big, strong anchor for you or for somebody, and that makes it much more easy for them to do better. But the third and really important part that can't be overlooked, the whole topic of this video, is also because their resource state over here is not connected to who they are over here. Or if it is, it's very, very subtly connected. It's not laid out. So the second part of this is identifying where all of your resource states are. Maybe it's in competition, maybe it's in art. I know this video is mainly about martial arts, but it can be anything art related or anything kind of career based. Doesn't have to be art at all. Maybe you're just a real killer when it comes to trading, like Gary's Economics or something like that, right? All of these places that you do excel in or you do good in. If you're one of the people that maybe has trouble, maybe hasn't quite, maybe you're young or maybe you've just kind of had a kind of unlucky few spell of years and there's not anything that comes up when it comes to Excel, just think of stuff which you're better at compared to maybe on average. And if there's not something that you can identify, that's totally fine too. But again, that's where you start. This is where the leverage is, right? You don't start with this exercise, you start with the leverage. Well, let me just find something that I'm interested in the most and try my best to just put a few years into that, get good at something. Okay, that's also very valuable, right? So, but it's a little bit of a different exercise. But for those of you that doesn't apply to, you'll have a few different areas which you're really strong at. And now, with researching the ecosystems with these different areas, comes the third step, which is you get to link all of these things together. I'm going to leave it really open for you because this is a personal exercise, okay? You link, oh, what am I good at here? And how does that link to this area? And all that kind of stuff. And then the kind of point three, step B, that was step A, is you link it to like your normal kind of baseline state. Is there anything stopping me from accessing these things when I'm just chilling on my own on the couch somewhere watching Netflix? And what this does, this is a map building exercise where you're mapping out, you're doing research in ecosystems and you're mapping out your own ecosystem. And from this, you have all of my other playlists, all of my other videos on this channel, as well as the videos to come, where now you can do really targeted shadow work. Because most likely what will come up is you'll have blocks around things. Yes, I know in theory that I have this thing over here, but I just feel like it's not the same. I feel like emotionally I'm not fully bought in, which again, if this sounds interesting, this is what my bread and butter is. This is what my one-on-one calls are, where we actually get over specific shadow work blocks. So this is my bread and butter. This is where we start to take your resource states and actually be able to open them and link them to all other aspects of yourself. So you become 10 times more yourself, authentically powerful, not in an overcompensating way. It can be as quick as that, but it can also take a little bit more time. Okay. So if that's something you're interested in, like I said, I have my one-on-one link below. No hard sales, no hard selling, but that would be a much more step-by-step guided sessions or program where we actually do this for you. Okay. If you want to do it by yourself, you have identified all of this and you start to really see, oh, there's a block over here. Oh, this isn't blocked. This means I can just access this right now. Okay. And with all the tools that I've given you in the free stuff, then you can actually start to have a coherent game plan of rather than just spinning your wheels for years or maybe even decades, which sadly a lot of my clients actually have, trying to do this personal development, trying to do this self-actualization stuff without any real goal. And it's because you haven't had an accurate map, you haven't had an accurate way, you haven't had a coherent way of looking at yourself. And if you don't have a coherent way of looking at yourself, then you can't do effective work. It's like trying to do an operation on somebody, but the surgeon is blinded. How do you think that's going to go? So this is a little bit more of a rant. This is a little bit more of a less structured overview, although I still give you some really good points on what to do. How I want you to look at this is like giving yourself glasses. You don't have proper vision. It's been blurry, and now you've given yourself glasses, and now you can do and execute on the things that you actually want to do and get the change, get the deep transformational change, which most likely got you onto this path to begin with.